Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Rada Madrigal, and I will be presenting for you today, along with Rochelle Wiltsius, and we'll also have Mark Richardson joining us a little bit later in the presentation. We're also joined virtually by some of our colleagues who may speak up during Q&A or to provide clarity when needed as we discuss this topic. Today we're here to talk about the changes being made to the AIM application and some updates on provisioning access to the CIRA application as well. In an effort to increase transparency and provide greater service to our stakeholders, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website so that you can review it in the future, and for those who were not able to join today's call. In addition, the slides for this presentation will be posted a little bit later today on TISA.com, and you'll find them in the Learning Center under New Modules. Our agenda for today, as I said, we're going to go over the changes to the AIM user interface, and we're going to talk about some of the functional enhancements that we made. We'll also talk to you about the updated AIM user guide, and we'll have questions and answers about the AIM application, and then we're going to take a pause to transition over to talking to you about provisioning access to the CIRA application, which not everyone who's dialed in to the first part of the call will need to attend for, and we'll give you a heads up at that time for everybody who needs to stay along with us. Before we get started, I wanted to share with you this definitions slide. So these are some of the abbreviations that you're going to see throughout the presentation today. And you'll be able to, so if you'll refresh your memory on what those mean, we'll take a look at this for just a moment, and then we'll dive into the content. So first off, top of mind perhaps, I wanted to share with you when we're going to be rolling out the changes to the new AIM application. We plan to cut over to the new version of AIM on Tuesday, February 2nd, and the way this is going to work is that we will take a maintenance outage in the morning starting at 8 a.m., and that will go for approximately 3 hours. So from 8 to 11 Pacific time, the AIM application will be out on maintenance, and you will not be able to access that. And then we'll be cutting over to the new application. At about 11 o'clock, we will open up a bridge from 11 to 1 for support if anybody has connectivity issues. And since we have changed the back-end links to the application, you'll need to make sure that you're connecting through the market participant portal or your EIM portal and not through links that may have been saved in favorites, for example. The bridge information you will get via email. We'll send out a customer service communication that's targeted to all UAAs. When we send out the link to the recording of this call and the new user guide, we'll also share with you bridge information that you can retain for that cutover date. So now I wanted to walk you through some of the changes to the AIM application that we have made for you here. First off, I wanted to point out that we're going to be changing the URL. So as I mentioned, as part of our cutover, we're going to be changing to the new URL, and we wanted to remind you here that the best practice is to access applications by navigating to them through your respective portal, whether it's the market participant portal, the RC portal, or the EIM portal. Make sure you're using the right links, and so that you don't have to update them. If you navigate them using the portal, you'll always be using the correct version, even when we do a cutover. If when you connect to the portal and try to click on the link, if you have any issues, you can always contact the ISO service desk if you are experiencing problems. And again, I said that we have plans to implement a bridge for cutover, so if we are experiencing connectivity issues, after we've cut over, you'll have contact information for who you can call to help you troubleshoot that. Now, one of the first things that you'll see changed in the AIM application is that you're going to be asked to acknowledge some statements when you first log in. So when you first become a user access administrator, and also every year there's going to be an annual acknowledgement message toward the beginning of the year that's going to ask you to confirm and agree to the terms and conditions of using the application. So you'll read the terms, you'll check the box, and then you'll click Submit, and then you'll see a new message that says, please close this window and reopen AIM in a new browser, and you'll be able to get started. Some of the changes that you will see is that we've made some changes to the look and feel of the application. So we've changed the icons and also some of the color schemes. I've got the new at the top of this slide and the old version at the bottom, so you can see that along the toolbar, which is near the title of the application, you'll see that those arrows and zoom in and zoom out, those types of icons look a little different. You'll also notice over here that we've changed the pencil icon to a more blue stylistic look, and also you'll see changes to the filtering options. If you look at the new and the old and compare the two, you can see, for example, that in the new UI, instead of the icon that kind of looks like an enter key on a keyboard, it now says go, for example. So those are some of the changes that you'll see. In addition to changes to the look and feel of the application, we've also helped you to keep track of where you are. So we've changed the way the colors work with the navigation. You'll see that the current tab that you're on is highlighted. So in this screenshot, I was on the UAA Profile Tab. So that one is highlighted, and if I then mouse over to another tab, like in the example where you see the mouse hover over the Applications tab, you can see that the color now changes on the mouse hover. So by looking at the top of the screen, you'll know what tab you're on by seeing the white, and then you can also use the mouse hover, and you'll see that those colors will change. And that's just to help you better identify where you are as you navigate through the application. Another change that we've made is we have changed all of the references. In the past, we used to call user access administrators POCs, or points of contact, and that terminology was changed, but we haven't yet changed the references to that in the application. So we made some changes to all references to POC have now been changed to UAA to align with that change in terminology. So for example, the first tab is called UAA Profile instead of POC Profile. And then there's also a new tab that we've added called UAAs, and I will explain that to you as well. As we're looking at the UAA Profile tab, and if you scan down or scroll down to the bottom, it also displays other user access administrators and their authorized entities and contracts. Now, this is not new functionality. We did add this piece to the bottom of that screen maybe about a year ago, but I wanted to point that out for those of you that might be a little bit new or becoming familiar with the application, or perhaps have used it for a period of time, to make sure that you know that that exists down there. You have the ability to see all of the other UAAs inside of your organization as well. Now, we've added a new tab to the application, and that is the UAAs tab. So in the past, in order to add new user access administrators, we had a manual process where there were forms that were submitted to the ISO and using DocuSign, and there was some back and forth. So we have replaced that functionality to add additional UAAs and put that inside of the AIM application. So that replaces the current process. And this whole tab, the UAA tab, is new. I do want to point out for you, though, that when we're setting up a brand new entity, if you are not in AIM yet or you are just beginning to do business with the ISO, you will still have to use this manual process to initiate and create your very first user access administrator. And then once you have someone who is a user access administrator who has the ability to go into AIM, that person then can use this new functionality to create any additional user access administrators from within the application. So there is a button at the top of the screen there, Create New UAA Profile, and when you click that button, you have the ability to set up a new user access administrator. When we create a new UAA profile, the first thing that you'll see is there's a user drop-down field, and this user drop-down box will show all users who are not currently user access administrators. So if they're already a user, if they're already a UAA, then you wouldn't be able to create a new UAA profile for that person. So that's the logic behind that. If you wanted to, there was a question in the chat that I'm seeing that asks if you can remove UAAs. You would do that from this tab, but not using the Create New UAA Profile button. A couple other notes on this screen. The next field down is the UAA notes, and you'll put some notes in there if you would like to. When you're creating, that is the field on this screen that's optional. If you do put notes in the UAA notes field, those end up getting stored in the UAA profile. So if you were saying like adding Mr. Johnson for blah, blah, blah reasons, that information is stored in that profile. And I'll show you on the next slide when I'm talking about that. The environment field will default to production. And when you're creating a new UAA, you'll want to select a start date of today or sometime in the future, and then select an appropriate end date. So you don't have the ability to backdate a user access administrator. You can begin their access starting today or a date in the future, and then you would put in an appropriate end date. And we say appropriate, so, you know, sometimes when we're adding folks into the system, the end date will be something like 30 years from now. However you decide to set up that end date is more your business practice, but just keep in mind that that is actually an end date. So if you set it only for a year from now, for example, when we reach that point, that person will no longer have the ability to be a user access administrator. You would need to go into the tool and push that date sometime into the future so that they could regain the ability to do that. All right, so here is the UAA Profile tab. After you've created a new UAA profile, you'll see that person show up in the list of user access administrators. And when you click on the profile button, you'll be able to see, for example, there's this notes field in the UAA profile section, and that is where those notes that will show up from the creation screens. Now I'm going to pause here for some questions, and so give me a moment here to look through the chat.
Hey, Rod, if you want, I'd be happy to read those out for you.
That would be great.
Yeah, let's do it. So the first question we have in the chat is, will the new AIM application work with the Edge browser?
And the answer is yes, it will.
Yeah, okay.
All right. The next question, we've got a couple of questions about if the PowerPoint will be available after this presentation. I can answer that one for you. The answer is yes. It will be available on our public website, kaiso.com, on the Learning Center. So we will put it there right after this training. The next question is, can you also remove UAAs in AIM instead of just adding new ones?
Yes. So this UAA profile screen, or this UAA screen, let me move from this next. This is where I wanted to show you where you'll see those notes show up in the notes field under the UAA profile section. This next screen here is once you have created a user access administrator, you now see a list of all of those user access administrators. So you would have the ability to go in and end date that person's UAA ability so that they no longer are a user access administrator. So that's how you would remove their ability to be a UAA, which, by the way, is different than completely removing them from the application. For example, if they fully no longer work for your company, you're going to want to revoke their certificate, not just remove them as a UAA. Next question.
All right. Does a user need to already exist in the account before they can be made a UAA?
Yes. You have to first be available and have a certificate and be listed in AIM as a user before we can make you a user access administrator.
All right. And is there a limit to how many UAAs that an entity can have?
No, there's not a limit. That would just be best practice from your organization. We'd like you to have a primary and maybe one or two backups, but how you manage that is up to you.
Okay. Next question, will end dates for current UAAs default to a certain date after the cutover?
My understanding, and Vishwa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they already have end dates in there, so they would stay what they are. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Currently, whoever is already in the system, they will have their dates. But whoever, if you are creating new, you have to give a date. There's no default date there.
All right, and just so you all know, we previously were in charge of putting that end date, and so I think we had put that out many decades, so you'll be able to see what that UAA end date is, but it's not approaching anytime soon.
All right. Next question, this is just a verification. Someone asked, when adding additional UAAs, they're assuming they would need to create the user and the certification first. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. They need to be a user and a certificate. Yes.
Awesome. And someone else asked, Nicole asked, will we be able to see all of our UAAs within our organization? So that includes RC, PR, entity, all of them.
Yes. That is true, Radha.
All right. For the API access, will it be the same as the KISO user interface, or a separate request, or does a separate request have to be created?
Do you mean creating an account to be used by a machine as opposed to a person? Is that the question? Because there is the ability to create a machine certificate that can be used by a machine or system that will then, you know, pull data with an API. I think that's the question.
Yeah, I think
and if not, then clarify.
Yeah, so whoever asked that question, Aparna, if you could go ahead and clarify the question just a bit more in the chat, we can get you an answer. Amy asks, does revoking a certificate remove their UAA access?
Yes.
Yes, let's be clear about that. So the word revoke and the action of revoke is something that removes everything and makes their certificate invalid. So the action of revoke you would use if someone is no longer with the company and you don't want them to have access to anything. Other things like removing can be done if they still work for that company but maybe have a different business function and now don't need access to some applications, or maybe they used to be a UAA and now they're not that anymore, so you're going to end date that UAA ability. But the concept of revoking means remove everything from this, you know, this person doesn't work for the company anymore and we're going to remove all of it. And that can't be undone, which is why I'm being more specific about that. If you revoke something on accident, it can't just be put back easily. So you would have to create a brand new certificate for that person.
All right. Amanda asks, does a user need to be a UAA to gain access to other applications?
No. The process of being a UAA, a user access administrator, is the person at your company that manages your users' access to all different applications. So if you are a business user that has certain needs, you have a user access administrator that will give you access to various ISO systems. But you don't have to be a UAA in order to get access to ISO systems. The role of UAA is the one who is going to manage everyone's access at your company and make sure the right people have access to the right tools they need.
All right. And Daniel asks if there is a warning email sent out prior to a UAA account reaching the expiration date.
Vishwa, can you answer that one? I don't think we send out an email for that, just for certificates that are expiring. Can you confirm?
Can you repeat that question? What is the question?
Of course. Amanda wants to know, excuse me, not Amanda. Daniel wants to know if a warning email is sent out prior to a UAA account reaching the expiration date. So if that date's about to come up, is that user going to be notified by email?
No. We do not have a written that facility yet.
Okay. We have someone just kind of mentioning that their former UAA left the company and they're still trying to get up to speed. So they're learning about AIM through this presentation, which can definitely be overwhelming. Can maybe someone speak to AIM support or how that person can follow up if they have questions about this change after the training?
Steve or Ginger, do you want to take that one?
Daynard?
Yeah, I will. I was on mute. So, yes, you're welcome to send me an email, and we can set up a meeting, and I can go over it with you if you are if you need clarification. So, my email address is sdaynard@kaiso.com. That's, and I think my name should be in there, but it's SDAINARD@kaiso.com.
Awesome.
And we can put that in the chat box, too.
Thanks, Ginger. Can you change your own end date if necessary?
Rather, that is true.
I'm sorry,
Okay,
what was
so
that?
yes,
okay.
you can change the end date. Thanks.
Okay. Will this enhancement that you're going over come with the ability to mark a user as inactive by the UAA?
Let me see if I understand the question. I think the person is wanting to know if you could mark a user as inactive as a user access administrator. And the concept of active or inactive, you would need to revoke their certificate so that they're no longer an active user if they, for example, don't work for the company anymore.
Okay. Let's see. Will we be able to add authorized entities for RIMS access to projects being completed on the old form, or would it be done on the new UAA screen? This question's a little confusing, so maybe, Lisa, you can provide some additional clarity in the chat. That would be good. So someone's asking if they are given an access request in AIM, will it be sufficient for Kaiso API calls? So that one's still a little tricky. I might have whoever has that question go ahead and when Rada stops for the Q&A period, I might have you ask that verbally so that we can get some clarification on what it is you're asking. So hold on to that until the Q&A session. If the existing UAAs have an established end date currently, where is it located for visibility? Rada?
So it's on this screen here. We've got the UAA tab, which is a new tab that you will see, or today, if you look at the first tab, which right this moment is called POC Profile, but with the new rollout will be called UAA Profile. At the bottom of that, you'll be able to see everyone's tab. So let's see, I am on slide 15 now, and I showed that on slide, let me roll back a little bit. I believe it was this one. Yes, slide 11 down here at the bottom. If you're a user access administrator, then down at the bottom of that first tab, you can see a list of everyone else who is also a UAA. And that was slide 11. Going back to slide 15, we'll just hold on a moment. This UAA tab that we're looking at now is brand new, and so you'll be able to see. It's hard to see right now, but if we zoom in, which I can't tell, honestly, if when I zoom in, you can also see me zooming in. But if we zoom in, you can see that there's a start date and an end date field. And so you'll be able to see what their start date and end dates are.
Great. Someone asked, is a certificate that's used by a machine for an API any different from the one for a user that uses the application through the UI?
I'm not familiar with that, so I don't know if either Trang or Vishwa has the answer to that and can answer. I'm not sure if folks are using a machine certificate or a user certificate for their API calls. Could someone help?
Hi.
So,
go ahead, Vishwa.
go ahead, Trang.
Okay, so this ties into a partner's question earlier about UI versus API access. And so in general, AIM provisioning is done by application, by certificate. And if an application has a UI and API, whatever permission is provisioned per that application, the access would be the same across the UI and the API, and those don't have to be granted separately. So that's the response to the first question for UI versus API. And then as far as best practice goes and then the difference between a user certificate and a machine certificate, they should be the same. If you're using a user certificate and you provision it per an app, you'll most likely be using that for a UI. If you're using a separate machine for an API call, the certificate would be the same, and provisioning that certificate should be the same as well. And I'll let Vishwa clarify or add anything.
That is true, Trang. The difference is just the notion, like how they're naming their certificate. As far as functionality concerned, it can work for both needs, either API or the UI side. Usually we ask them to create in a way that they know that is being used for the API. It's just a notion.
Yeah. Yep, and so to elaborate on that again, our best practice is to, if you do have a separate machine and a separate user, request separate certificates for those, and it also helps with troubleshooting on our side too if you do have issues, just for tracking where that application is accessing from and what certificate is being used and things. So I hope that clarifies it, but please let us know if there's further questions on that.
Great. Thanks, guys. Another just a piece of feedback, not a question. Dennis says that being able to disable a user without revoking the certificate would be a beneficial feature. So just to clarify, is there a way to disable a user without revoking that certificate, or must we revoke the certificate? What?
So let me talk a little bit about that. There is a certificate assigned to a person or to a machine that has access to applications. So the question is, can you make it inactive but not fully revoke it? And I would say the way to do that would be to remove all access to a given application, for example. So if I had a machine certificate and I'm no longer using it to pull data through API to a number of systems, I can remove all of the access from that certificate. And then technically, it doesn't have any access to anything, but it hasn't been revoked. But there was a question about whether or not you would want to just let something expire, even if they don't work there anymore, or if you want to revoke it. And best practice from an info security perspective is, if the person doesn't work there anymore, you should revoke their certificate. Don't just let it expire. That's just an information security best practice.
Okay. Are there any changes to RIMs, i.e. through the market participant portal access?
There are no changes to RIMs.
Awesome. Thank you. So we already kind of actually I did not ask this question. Can inactive users be reactivated instead of just creating a new user?
Yes, they should be able to be reactivated.
Okay, great. And I think we already answered this. Is there any change in how a certified entity adds projects in RIMs? And I think, Ginger, you said no. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So will the new UI application resolve AIM user access database query issue noted in a specific case with the application duplications when copying their endorsed user access? So Ginger and Steve can clarify that since this is a specific ticket, maybe we can get back to you individually and I can send that ticket to the team. Do you guys have access to that ticket number?
Yeah, I'm aware
I
of the ticket. We are actually resolving that issue with this build.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, we have a slide coming up towards the end of this section. After we share all of the enhancements, we also have a slide that talks about the bug fixes, and we're going to mention a couple of things that we've fixed for you as well. And that's coming up.
All right. Where on the Learning Center will we be able to see this presentation? Right when you go into the Learning Center, all the way to the right, there is a section saying new modules, and that's where you'll be able to access it. So it'll be right there to the right side. And then last but not least is the last question we'll answer, and then Rhonda's going to go ahead and finish up, and we'll pause again for a question and answer time. Is the ISO looking at a way to remove resource IDs from the current ACL or ACL groups?
I think we need to have them ask that question verbally to understand a little bit more about that. So if we could hold that one till the Q&A.
All right, we can do that. All right, guys, so you can still keep asking questions through the chat if you'd like, or if they're more complicated questions, we always suggest that you do it verbally. Rod, if you want to continue with the training, and then we'll stop again when that happens.
Absolutely. So let's move on to cover some of the new changes that we have implemented. So getting back to the presentation, when you create a new user access administrator profile by clicking on that screen and putting in a start and end date, they will then appear on this list, on that same tab, of all of the folks that are user access administrators. So you'll see them on the list immediately. For those of you that have given access to a new UAA, that person, that new UAA, should wait about 30 minutes after their profile has been created for all of that data to be populated and set up an AIM for them. So give it about 30 minutes once you've set up a new UAA for them to be able to go in and create access to things, because there's also some other things that you have to do to get that set up correctly. So for example, I'm a user access administrator and I've been created in the system, but until I have been given access to certain contracts and entities, I don't have the ability to actually assign anyone to anything. So when I create a brand new user access administrator, I need to click on their name in the section that says user access administrators, and then down towards the bottom, you're going to see these two sections here. One says UAA authorized contracts, and the other is UAA authorized entities. Now, you need to decide which contracts that UAA has the ability to grant access to, and also for which entities. Now, some of the way, and this will vary based on your organization, right? So if you're a smaller organization, maybe every UAA grants access to everything. Perhaps if you're a larger organization and you have individuals set up by certain job duties, then perhaps certain UAAs will be in charge of managing access to certain contracts, and others will be in charge of others. You at your organization will need to figure out how that works, but here is where you would go to assign those contracts to those new UAAs. So you would click on the specific type of contract using the drop-down button, and then click on the green button that says Add Contract to Selected UAA to add the specific contract, and then for the specific entities. So new UAAs will not be able to provision access in AIM until they have been assigned to at least one contract in one entity. Now, there is no limit on the number of UAAs that can be added. You can, at your organization, decide how many you want to have and what they're going to be in charge of. We ask that you have at least a primary and maybe one or two backups. Now, as this is a new feature, if when you are trying to give access to contracts and entities to these new UAAs that you're creating, but it seems like maybe the list isn't complete, or there's some sort of discrepancy between the types of contracts you think you should have access to and the ones you're seeing on the list, we ask that you reach out to sbrequests@kaisa.com to address any discrepancies that you might see in those drop-down menus. Now, as I mentioned, you have the ability to assign certain contracts and entities to certain UAAs. So it's possible that the contracts and entities vary based on who you are clicking on, which UAA you've selected in the list. So the way this works is similar to our other applications. You click on the person's name in the top section, and then down below you will see the contracts and entities that have been assigned to them. Moving on to another tab. So that UAA tab that I was discussing, that's brand new. Everything on that screen and all that functionality is new and added into the system. The rest of the tabs that we're going to go through are going to just point out a couple of things that we've changed or enhanced for you. So for example, on the Users tab, so you'll see I'm on the Users tab because now it's highlighted in white. In the past, when you were looking at this list, if they were a brand new user with a status of new, they didn't automatically show up when looking at the list of all active users, and that was confusing to folks because they weren't seeing their new people unless they changed this drop-down list. So we've changed the way that we populate this list. So now if you're looking at active users, you will also see users that have a status of new, so they won't be invisible to you. You'll be able to see them here. They now show up by default on that tab. Another thing about this tab, this is something that we implemented in a prior release, but I also want to call it out here just as a reminder that we renamed these sub-tabs. So about a year ago, we changed this, but now on the Users tab, in addition to seeing all of the users inside of your organization, we've separated out your endorsed users into two different tabs. So there's one that's called Users Endorsed to Us. That was renamed, and we're just reminding you, we're pointing that out here, pointing that out to here. And I can scroll down to the next one. There also is one called Users Endorsed by Us. So again, this was implemented in a prior release, but we wanted to call it out here as a reminder. So that was a change to the Users tab. Moving a couple of tabs to the right, another thing that we've changed is when you are creating an access request, so this is the Access Request tab, we now have added the full complete name of the application to the list. So that will help you better decipher the acronyms that we have there. So I've put that, a square around that. So now, for example, ADS, you'll see the application name is Automated Dispatch System. So you don't have to decipher what those acronyms mean. Now you have a clear list of what all those applications are. So that's an enhancement there. And a couple other things about the Access Request tab. On the Request History sub-tab there, we've added some filtering options there at the top, along with new fields added to the Access Request details. So when making changes to the application, we also went through the list of things that people ask us on a regular basis or have difficulty determining who specifically. So we added a couple of new fields to the Access Request details to list the certificate name and the user ID to better help you identify who has access to what. So we've added filtering to this screen and some new fields to better identify the individual person. And I've got a couple more tabs to go through, and then I'll stop for some questions. This next tab, the Endorsed Access Request, so when you're giving access to a user outside of your org or asking another org to grant access to your user, you can now see on the Endorsed Access Request History, the sub-tab, you can now see access requests that were submitted by other UAAs in your organization. And we've also added those same new fields, the CN and the user ID, so that you can better identify who has access to what. So that will give you the certificate name and that person's user ID. And these are things based on some, questions that folks have been having, and so we wanted to add a little bit more to the application here for you. All right, now onto the bug fixes. So we talked about UI changes, and you saw the screenshot there. And what you will find is a lot of it was look and feel, some of it was enhanced functionality or helping you better analyze data. We also did some bug fixes as well. So there's a couple things that we changed. For example, on the UAA Profile Tab, there's a section for endorsed users that haven't been given any access, and those names were actually not clearing out of that section of that panel. So we fixed that issue. So those names will now clear from that panel. We also fixed an issue on the Access Request tab that was causing a refresh error during submissions of new access requests. So you would have to refresh, or there were problems there. We fixed that issue with the application. And then there was a question in the chat that talked about this. When you were creating an access request and you wanted to copy someone's access, it was showing a lot of duplicate entries on that panel. So we have fixed that issue as well. And then just overall application performance, we've improved the speed of the application and its performance. So these are the high level of the bug fixes that we have implemented for you, along with those enhancements that we've added there. Let's see. A couple other points that I wanted to make. So the AND symbol, that's no longer accepted in the first name or the last name field, that special character, that we can no longer accept that in either of those two fields. And we wanted to mention something about certificates to you again and renewal of that. You will get email messages, the UAA, when certificates need to be renewed. So those reminders that get sent out every week on Tuesday morning around 9 a.m., you'll get an email every Tuesday that tells you about which certificates need to be renewed. You're going to keep getting those messages until both of these things have happened. Number one, that you, the UAA or the user, has registered for that certificate, and the ISO has renewed it. So the certificate needs to be registered for and renewed in order to stop those emails. And we have updated the AIM user guide with all of this information. So it's accessible now. You can navigate to it through that path that I've identified up there. It's going to be under the application name, Access and Identity Management. There's new screenshots of everything that we covered here, including instructions on how to complete the new tasks that we've added. So creating a new UAA and then adding contracts and authorized entities to the profile. And of note, we also have computer-based training on the AIM application. And we are going to update that, but it's after go live. So there's going to be a period of time where the CDT doesn't actually match the application. So we ask that in the meantime, while we're updating those computer-based trainings, to have this new functionality added in so that you can also see the new look and feel of everything, we ask that you refer to the AIM user guide in that time period, and it's going to have screenshots for you and step-by-step instructions on how all of that works. And so now we're going to pause for questions. That is everything that we wanted to share with you about the enhancements, the changes to the look and feel, and also the bug fixes. So we'll go ahead and take questions. How about we do questions first?
Yes. I was on the same page since we did all the chat questions. I was going to say if we could do that first.
So Michelle, if you would, let's see if anybody has a verbal question and wants to ask a question verbally, and then we'll tackle things in the chat.
All right, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question via phone, please press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Once again, #2 will enter you into the question queue. And we do have questions on the line. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hey, this is Wanda from Anaheim. I just have a quick question. I noticed that you guys are going to be creating the new tab on the UAA. I was just curious, after the cutover is done, do we have to create our own primary and secondary in there, or will the ISO already have the current primary and the secondary in there?
The current UAAs, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, as I was just going to say, Rada, the current UAAs will be present in the UAAs tab.
Okay, perfect. Okay, sounds great. Thank you very much.
All right, we are moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, this is Eric from Pasadena. Currently, if I have an endorsed user, I have a third party who does some of our work, and when they need to have additional users added on, if I copy one of their users so that I can just get the applicable applications that they need, right now I get everything that their user has, as opposed to just the ones that are specific to my organization or to me being the UAA for. So I have to weed through those so that I can actually add the access if I try to choose a person. Is that fixed in this?
Radha, I can take this one. This is the same that we are talking about, showing the duplicate request in the copy function. So that should cover this issue also. That fix should cover this issue also.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, we're moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, this is Derek from SC. I had questions regarding the ACO groups. So currently on existing ACO groups, we can edit and we can only add new resource IDs into that ACO group. The ISO is looking a way for us to also remove resource IDs from existing ACL groups.
I believe that's an enhancement that we're working on. Mark Richardson, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So currently we do not and are not working towards that functionality. So I would believe that would have to be submitted as a city ticket, requesting that as an enhancement, where we will review that with IT and determine the feasibility.
Okay.
All right. I think we're moving to the next question in the queue. And as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, #2 will enter you into the question queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, this is Avelino Gonzalez. I have a question. So lately, the trend for a lot of companies is to move their somewhat access management and access reviews into a more automated fashion. Currently, to extract user lists out of KAISO, it's a manual process where the current admin has to go in and manually download the list. Is there any thought or enhancements looked at to kind of make that a more automated fashion, be it either like schedule a report to be emailed with the user access list, or have some kind of single sign-on or federated ID via API or user to kind of automate that in a more scheduled way?
So hi, this is Ginger. So we actually have been working at this. We've had this request from a few different companies. We are looking at doing some internal changes and trying to take this into consideration of how we could do that. We do have a lot of security concerns with producing an API like that, but we understand that it is inconvenient for your companies to not have that. So it is something that we are looking at trying to figure out how to do and keep it in compliance with our security requirements. So it is something we are trying to figure out how to do for you. We just don't have a horizon. We don't even have design on how we could possibly do it, but it is under consideration.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, this is Aparna Awala from PG&E. My question is, usually I give access to my technical team as well as other team members. And when it comes to the technical team, the team should have access both for KAISO UI and also download the data using KAISO APIs. So when I give the access for the KAISO UI, they also will get the API access, or it's a different access we need to rise?
Hi, this is Trin.
Go ahead, Trin.
Thanks. So thanks for the question. So to clarify, that user certificate is provisioned by application, and whatever access they have to the application applies to both the UI and the API of that specific one. So you do not have to grant separate access to that certificate for the UI for a certain app and then the corresponding API. It should just be done at the app level and carry across both interface types.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Good morning. Thank you for this training and update. I have already downloaded the updated documents, but I would like to know if this presentation in its entirety, meaning the recording of this actual presentation, including the Q&As, will be posted and available.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, it will
so we get a copy of this in a couple of business days, and then we'll post it on the Learning Center as well. Today, you will see a copy of the slides posted to the Learning Center. The recording takes a couple of days, and it will also be posted there as well, including the Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
All right, we are moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question. Caller, please unmute your phone or device. You may ask your question. All right, we are going to move to the next caller in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question. All right, we're moving to the next caller in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hi, Krishna here from Puget Sound Energy. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi. Hey, thank you for the training. The question I had was related to ACL. I think my question was ACL does not work for MRIS. Is that correct, or is there reason why? And is there any plans for the future for enhancing this ACL to also give the access for MRIS? And are there other applications that we cannot give access using ACLs?
I'm not sure on the ACLs question.
Actually, Steve, I would like to know more information on this one, because currently it works for MRIs some roles and it is designed for some roles and not the other. I would like to know what exactly he was listing when it is not working. Is there a particular role that it's not working?
Yeah, it's an external. Yeah, it's an external entity that is requesting that they endorsed over to my entity, and only for one resource. So I created an ACL for just one resource, and I was able to provision ADS, CMRI, but when I choose MRIS, the drop-down wouldn't show MRIS as an available application that can be provisioned using the ACL.
I'm wondering if you have a contract for that role. So just send us an email or contact us with more details. We can check on your contract assignment.
Okay. Our representative is Steve Casanelli. Should I email you guys?
You can just submit a city case if you have access to it. And this is Steve Daynard, and Steve Casanelli and I will get that city case. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're moving to the next question in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question. Caller, please do unmute your phone or device. Your line is unmuted. All right, we are going to move to the next caller in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. You may ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. Hi, this is Tina Marie Loza from Southern California Edison. You mentioned that there is a certificate renewal email sent out on Tuesdays. Is that different from the email that I receive on Sunday?
So we are actually rescheduling the Sunday email to the Tuesday, and we will be getting more reminders until all the steps are completed.
Okay, so it's not an additional email?
No.
We won't be seeing two. Okay, thank you.
All right. At this time, I do not see any additional questions in the question queue.
Awesome, thanks. Just we're going to follow up on just a handful of the chat questions that we got. These are pretty short questions here. I can't remember, Radha, did we answer how many UAAs are allowed per company?
Yes, we answered that. We don't have a limit. It's their choice.
Is there documentation somewhere that describes each application and what that application does for the user?
I'm not sure. Specific.
So I had answered that in the chat for everyone to see. So section 2.4 of the market instrument BPM lays out all the different market applications that ISO offers. And to the extent you guys have further questions and need more details, I would recommend reaching out to your client representative.
Okay. Also, some questions about those email messages going out on Tuesday versus Sunday. It seems like some people are saying that they're currently receiving emails on Sundays. Are the ones that you were talking about on Tuesday different, or will it get moved to Tuesday? What's the update with that?
Yeah, it will be moved to Tuesday.
Great, thank you. And will revoking access stop those expiration emails?
Yes.
Great, and then last but not least, what are the supported browsers? I know we talked about Edge. Will Chrome work as well?
Yeah, Chrome will work, but officially we are publishing for, we recommend using Chrome and Internet Explorer.
Okay, great. So those are all the questions that I have from the chat.
Okay.
All right, so did we want to conclude this piece now before we move on to the next piece on SIRA?
Yeah, we can go ahead and move on. Radha, maybe you want to give a quick overview of what folks can do if they do have questions that weren't answered during this training, and then we can go ahead and move on to the next section.
Absolutely. Okay, so the way we've broken this training up is into two sections. So at this point, we're going to move from talking about the AIM enhancements to a second topic. If you have questions that have yet been unanswered regarding the AIM enhancements, you can send them to customerreadiness@CAISO.com, or you can reach out individually to your client representative if you have a specific question about access provisioning that you're attempting to do that doesn't seem to be going the way that you think it should. You can reach out to them or submit a city ticket on that. So we do have the ability to get back to you offline and answer any follow-up questions. So send your questions to customerreadiness@CAISO.com, and thank you for attending this piece